And we have Jackie French with us, who is the author of Diary of a Wombat. We are so excited to hear from you. Thanks so much, Jackie.
Pleasure. Here we are. Diary of a Wombat by Jackie French and illustrated by the incredible Bruce Watley. And we begin. Monday morning. Slept. Afternoon. Slept. Evening. Ate grass. Scratched. Night. Ate grass. Slept. This is the diary of a very, very real wombat, and her name was Mothball. And when I first met her, she was the sweetest, cutest, loveliest little wombat. She was about this big, and she'd been discovered in Canberra, badly bitten by dogs. She was rescued, and when all her wounds were sewn up again, she looked like she'd been eaten by moths. There were little holes everywhere in her fur. So because she was round, they called her Mothball, though later her fur grew back again. And she was so cute. She'd grown into quite a big wombat. She was given to us to return to the bush. And I put her in the cage in the back seat of my car, and I started to drive. It was about a 2-hour drive. And I got about 10 minutes, and suddenly there was a noise at the back going, that was the sound of Mothball biting through her cage. And then suddenly there was bump, 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 bump. And there was Mothball sitting on my lap, and the car is sort of veering wildly in the traffic. And then again there was that was Mothball eating my steering wheel, which is not a good idea when you're driving in traffic. Luckily, I'd been to the markets in Canberra. I bought a bag of carrots. So I pulled off the road. I put her back into the cage. I tied the cage with my, actually with my stockings. And then I put in 3 carrots. And I started to drive. And there was a very happily from the back as Mothball ate her carrots. And about another 10 minutes later, there was from the back again. Anyway, in the 2-hour journey, Mothball ate probably 3 kilos of carrots. And she was not impressed when she didn't get them. She was a very sweet wombat, but incredibly stroppy. And by then, she knew that carrots came from human beings. And unfortunately for us, she taught all the other wombats around that there are these delicious things called carrots, and humans can deliver them. Wombats can teach other wombats. Now, we live in the middle of the bush in Australia. Our place is at the bottom of a very deep gorge. We've got wedge-tailed eagles, we've got lyrebirds, we've got wallabies, we've got kangaroos, we've got wild animals of all kinds, often very rare and endangered ones. So most of our property now we've turned into a conservation reserve to look after the animals. And during the bad bushfires in Australia, we had hundreds of animals. If you look out the window here, the whole ground would be covered in animals, but because it was a bushfire, they didn't bite each other. You had wombats next to wallabies, next to possums, next to black snakes. They were all sharing the same water, they were sharing the same food. When one little wombat came down from the bushfire and her fur was burnt to black, her feet looked like charcoal, she was too weak even to get to the water. So I took a dish of water to her and she drank. And then after about 20 minutes, she slowly got to her feet again and she started to walk towards the food. And I've never seen anything like it. All the animals just parted to let this tiny little wombat through so she could eat and she could drink. But Mothball and Wild Whiskers, who is her granddaughter, are usually not kind like that. If a wallaby bounds past when Wild Whiskers is eating carrots, Wild Whiskers will bite her. Wild Whiskers tries to bite me every time I take carrots out. I have to, well, speak very sternly, go inside, and finally she backs off. and looks very, very, very angry because I've beaten her, and she's not allowed to bite me. Most wombats, in fact, don't bite humans. If you can go very quietly and don't startle them, you can get very close to them. You can become quite friendly with them. The first wombat I knew was called Smudge, and we became very, very close friends, but not Mothball. So everything in Diary of a Wombat is true. I was on the phone to a friend one night and she was saying, "Oh, what's that door? What's that noise?" And I said, "Oh, that's his Mothball bashing the front door. She wants her carrots." And what's that noise? "Oh, that's his Mothball chewing through the screen. She wants her carrots." And what's that noise? "Oh, that's his Mothball bashing up the garbage bin." And what's that noise? "Oh, she's chewing the doormat now." We went through an awful lot of doormats. Finally, we've got a doormat inside, not outside, and we don't need roots or anything outside. Wombats mostly spend their days sleeping, eating, and scratching. And it's actually rather hard to write a book about an animal that spends its life eating, scratching, and sleeping. But when wombats are interested, they can do all sorts of other things. Last year, Wild Whiskers decided that we were waiting far too long to give her the carrots. So she dragged a cardboard box over to the garden chair. She climbed up onto the garden chair. She climbed from the box onto the box, from the box onto the garden chair, from the garden chair up onto the windowsill, and then she jumped down from the windowsill onto my lap on the sofa, which was a bit of a shock, having a very, very large, very smelly, very dusty wombat suddenly landing on your lap. She wanted her carrots. I've known one wombat to count to 6. Usually he got 4 carrots every evening, but I only had 1 carrot. So I gave him 1 carrot and he bashed up the garbage bin. So the next night I just thought, okay, I took 1 carrot and I cut it into 4 pieces and he was happy. It wasn't the amount of carrot, it was the numbers. So then I took 1 carrot and I cut it back to 3 pieces and he bashed up the garbage bin. 4 pieces, that was fine. He left the garbage bin. So then I started doing 5 pieces. If I cut back to 4, he'd bash up the garbage bin. Finally, we got to 6 pieces of carrot and he demanded 6 pieces of carrots every day. Didn't matter how big they were. But then, unfortunately, it rained and we got lots of green grass and he walked away and I didn't ever see him again. So I've no idea whether we've got one mathematical genius wombat or maybe wombats are secretly doing mathematical calculations in their burrows that we don't know about. I've no idea. It's very hard to test a wombat's intelligence. Wombats can't see very well. They just focus on dirt and grass. And their hearing, they can hear very well, but they don't process it. It takes a wombat about 46 seconds to understand a sound. Whereas wombats mostly see the world by the way they smell. Now, if we smell something horrible, it's, "Oh, I think I can smell something. Yeah, yeah." That takes us about 46 seconds. And it's the same with a wombat when they hear something. It takes them a long time to work out what it is. I've never known a wombat even to know their name. So they see the world by the way it smells. And no humans, I think, have ever worked out how to do an intelligence test for wombats. If a wombat's got plenty of food and it's very comfortable and it's a wet day or it's a hot day, the wombat might spend 3 days and 3 nights just sleeping. If they're happy, they sleep. On the 3rd night, they're hungry and they come out again. So it's just occasionally, just every few months, someone will see a wombat do something and we will be amazed that a wombat can do it. But there's no way to test to find out what they can do. I'm still really, really hoping that wombats don't work out that carrots come into refrigerators. Or one morning we're going to come out to a lot of a mess. Okay, have you got any questions about Diary of a Wombat or any of the Wombat books or Wombats or Australia?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. Do you guys have any questions about wombats? Or about Australia? And remind me, what city in Australia do you live in, Jackie?
That's the question I'm asked whenever I ring up a call line, is what city do I live in? I don't live in a city. I don't live anywhere near a city. The nearest city is 2 hours drive away. To get to that city, you've got to climb up a 2,000-meter mountain with a road that's so narrow, it's called the goat track, and only one car can go up at any one time. It's got ruts that are literally as deep as that, and you have to go around it. It's got landslides, rocks fall down it. Often you've got to cross flooded creeks. There is the occasional bushfire. Our road didn't have a name until a few years ago. It's now called the Majors Creek Mountain Road, but everyone used to know it as the goat track, not because there are goats, but just because only a goat could really use it. So I live a long way from a city. The nearest city is Canberra, which is Australia's capital city, but it's very different country there. I've got to go over a great big mountain range to get to it. Canberra is tableland country with sort of golden grass around it and quite thin gum trees. The gorge where we live, part of it is rainforest, part of it's dry forest. There's tree fern forest, there's waterfalls. You can climb up through the gorge, and the cliffs are so steep that when you look into the water, all you can see is the blue sky and the clouds. And when you're swimming through those pools, it's almost as though you're flying through the sky. You're just swimming through the blue. And you wouldn't know whether it was 10,000 years ago or 10,000 years in the future. The rest of the world has just vanished. There are a few problems. We don't get mobile phone reception. In fact, any phone reception is very poor. Internet is very poor. But we have got so many animals and so many birds. Every time you look out the window, there are wild animals, there are wild birds. In spring and in autumn, we're on the migration path for many, many, many birds. So suddenly it will sound like there's 100 helicopters coming up the gorge, and you look up and there'll be thousands of birds all around you, all of them migrating. Some of them in different colours. Some of them are so high and so fast, you can't even tell what kind of bird they are. I moved here now about 50 years ago. I was very, very, very broke. Everyone had told me, no, dear, you can't be a writer. No one can make a living being a writer in Australia, because Australia doesn't have a very large population compared to most countries in the world. So I became a farmer when I left university, and I went broke. There was a bad drought. My marriage broke up. I was living with a baby in a shed in the bush with no electric light and no running water, and I needed the money to register my car, and I didn't have it. I was really broke. But a friend who knew I loved writing said, well, why don't you send something to a publisher? And luckily, I had a wombat to help me. I was using a really old typewriter I'd found at the dump, and the wombat hated it. I used to type sitting on the floor, just going tap, 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 tap. And every night the wombat writer. And after 3 months of wombat droppings on the keyboard, my typewriter was soft and squishy when you pressed it. So when I wrote my first book, which was Rainstones, I had to write it without using the letter E. And then I had to put all the E's in burrow, E, 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 E. And also, too, I'm dyslexic. I can't spell. My spelling is appalling. Anyway, I sent it to the publisher. The editor took one look, gave a shriek of laughter and said, hey, everyone, look at this mess. they said it was the messiest, worst spelt book they had ever seen. And they assumed only someone who was really stupid would have sent that in. So the editor took it out to read it to everyone in the office so they could giggle. It was probably the worst book in the world. And she read the first paragraph, then she read the second paragraph. And then there in the office for the rest of the afternoon, she read the entire book aloud to everyone in the publishing house. And when she'd finished, she went inside and made me a very good offer to publish the book. It was shortlisted for some major awards. It's been in print ever since. And they told me very rashly they'd love to publish anything I wrote after that. And that was now, well, that was 1990 that happened. And I don't think they had any idea I would write quite as many books in that time. But I've been publishing with them ever since then. But if I hadn't been dyslexic, if it hadn't been for the wombat with the droppings on the typewriter, I probably wouldn't have been a writer now. They couldn't possibly read all of the books that were sent into them, but no one had ever seen anything like the mess that I'd sent in.
Well, I love that you pushed past those struggles and that you have become a prolific author. Oh, how wonderful. Did you guys have questions about Wombat?
I don't think.
I think we have a quick question, if that's okay, Jackie.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
Why do wombats, when they poop, why is their poop square?
Oh, that's an excellent question. First of all, their droppings aren't always square. It's only when they eat very dry grass and dry food that their droppings are square. However, because Australia has a lot of droughts and large parts of Australia are a very dry country all the time, it means that mostly their droppings are square. So if you go out and look on our front doorstep, our front steps next to my car and the front and a few other places, you'll see that the wombat droppings last night were actually very long and soft and green. They weren't square. But when the wombats eat dry food, they've got very, very strong muscles in the tube where the droppings come out. So those muscles contract and they take out every possible bit of moisture from the droppings, which is a very sensible thing to do if you don't have water to drink, if all the moisture you've got just has to come from the grass. So the wombats we've got living here have got water to drink, but otherwise the muscles squeeze it and squeeze it, and when it comes out, it's in squares. But also people can see it because, as I said, wombats communicate with smells. So adult wombats put their droppings on as high a place as they can possibly reach, like on a step or a garden chair, or a rock in the creek or a log. So if there's a high spot where there are wombats around, you'll probably find a pile of wombat droppings. We had one wombat who lived over the creek in a drought, and the creek was dry. And every night she used to leave her droppings on a rock in the middle of the creek. And then it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and the creek flooded. But every night there were still new wombat droppings on that rock in the creek. She was saying, "This is my rock, this is my creek, none of you can have it." And she must have been swimming through the flood every night just to get her droppings on that rock. There is nothing as determined as a wombat.
Awesome, I love that. Thank you so much for that explanation. You have a question?
What else do wombats eat except carrots and grass?
They mostly eat grass covers. A lot of the grass covers in Australia are ground covers, aren't actually grasses. So we've got about 56 very low growing plants that look like grass, but they're not. So they eat those. They love eating the bases of things like tussocks and reeds and rushes. They love eating anything, lots of roots. In dry times, they'll dig up young tree roots. They love eating parsnips. One wombat we had called Gabby got into our vegetable garden and discovered that parsley had delicious roots. So she ate all the parsley roots. And within 3 weeks, every bit of parsley within 10 kilometres had been dug up and the roots had been eaten. She must have managed to spread the news to every wombat. Hey, everyone, parsley is good to eat. It's yummy. Dig up the parsley. So they love all sorts of roots. They love sweet potato. They like corn. Luckily, though, corn grows up like that and wombats are down there. So it's only when a bit of corn is accidentally knocked over that the wombats discover there's something delicious up there. And then they knock over all the corn and they eat all the corn in a night. So they like to eat lots of things, but mostly they like to eat the grass and the ground covers. Sometimes when it's very, very dry or during the drought and during the bushfires, I fed them either rolled oats. That's only an emergency to give them energy if they're not well, or what we call crunchies, which are made of processed grain and lucerne. But I've been putting them out lately and the wombats just ignore them. They won't eat them. They eat the carrots, but they really just want grass and carrots. They don't eat the other things. With one drought that we had, the wombats started to eat the fallen apples and the pears and the avocados. Now, I don't think wombats should eat avocado or apples or pears. Never feed it to them. But these were wild wombats, so I couldn't stop them. And every night we would hear digestive noises, shall we say, underneath our house. Very rude digestive noises as they were trying to digest the apples and the pears. But they looked very healthy. They had lovely glossy coats and they ended up even fatter at the end of the drought than they were at the beginning. But they shouldn't eat apples and pears because it's got too much sugar. And don't feed them avocados. That was just what they decided to eat. Sometimes wombats will also eat bark. Young wombats will often just actually try eating all sorts of things. But mostly, as I said, they just love really, really, really good grass.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, how about one last question?
No, a pleasure. Yeah.
How old do wombats usually live to?
That is a very good question. Wombats haven't actually been studied for very long. The first people who studied them and took them back to England had no idea what wombats ate. So the wombats only lived a few months. The poor animals actually starved to death because they tried to give them the wrong food. Then I think it was in the 1960s, a boy called P.J. Nicholson, who was 14 years old, decided he was interested in wombats, and he started to study wombats and call down wombat holes. And he wrote the first paper on wombats, this 14-year-old boy. PJ is now a friend, and we're co-directors of the Wombat Foundation. We raise money for research into endangered hairy-nosed wombats. Now, the wombats we've got here are called bare-nosed wombats or common wombats. But no one did any work after that. A vet student and I, in about 1975, decided we would put a skeleton of a wombat together. We were interested to see if wombats ever got arthritis, because we'd noticed in the bones of some of the wombats in the wombat holes, the dead wombats, or very, very long dead wombats, it looked as though some of the bone had been worn away, and we thought they might get arthritis. So we put some skeletons together. Then we contacted Australia's scientific organisation, CSIRO, and the Australian Museum, and said, oh, we put some wombat skeletons together, but we don't know if we've done it properly or not. And they got really excited, and they said, oh, no one's ever done it before. Can you send us some photographs? We'd really like to see them. Oh, that's wonderful. And so for about 10 years, I seem to be the only person who was doing research on wombats. But that was a long time ago, starting in about the mid-1980s. Vet schools started studying wombats. Lots of people started studying how to look after injuries from wombats. But there's still a lot that isn't known about wombats, including mange. We don't even know really if there are different subspecies of wombats. We know there are some, but we don't know how many there are. We don't really know how long wombats live. In some areas, they live about 16 years. In some areas, they live about 32 years. We just haven't been studying them for long enough to really know much about how long wombats live and what things can affect that. So we need a lot more study about wombats. But it's starting to happen. Vet students are starting to specialise in wombats. People with animal husbandry and zoologists are starting to look at wombats. And as I said, our organisation raises money, and that's for research, so we can find out more about wombats to work out how to protect them.
That is so informative. Thank you so much, Jackie. This has been fascinating to learn more about them.
Well, sorry, I think we've probably talked a lot more about wombats than about books.
No, we were so delighted to hear about wombats.
That's okay. I do write books about other things, but mostly a wombat seems to creep in somewhere. There've been a very few books that don't have wombats, but yeah. But look, you never know with wombats. They appear no matter what you want. So they appear.
I love it. They're so representative of your beautiful country, so that's perfect.
Look, thank you very much. This has been lovely, and thank you so much for your questions.
For coming on. It's been so wonderful having you.
A pleasure. A pleasure. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay.